Trent WOODALL is part of a rich four-generation Australian story in the world of travelling entertainment and attractions. His business, the Events Company, are ramping up after the industry impact of COVID over the past 2 years. His personal story and the discovery of his passion is really something else. We met briefly at this year's Australian Amusement, Leisure and Recreation Association's annual conference and showcase. Sit back and meet Trent WOODALL as we take a look across his unique and fascinating life. Don't forget, if you are enjoying the Park Life podcast, please take the time to rate, review and share. Okay, let's get to it.
My company's called the Events Company. We do carnival rides, show rides. So we do all the royal shows, Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne, Perth.
Wow.
As well as our own events, micro events, pop-up events and things like that, yeah.
And how long have you been in that business?
Well, I started doing it, I do it on my own. I started in 2007, but my parents always did it. And I guess I'm a fourth generation showman.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And funnily enough, it was something I never wanted to do growing up.
Why?
I think because, it wasn't unique and special to me. I think it's one of those things when you grow up, you take for granted a lot of things, how hard your parents work, all these kind of things. And I definitely took for granted my life, what my parents did, and it was normal to me. It was as normal as someone who was in a butcher, And so, in a way it was boring, which sounds crazy, and I just wanted to do anything else but that. I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to do this, I wanted to travel the world and do all sorts of things. And then the way life works, I found my passion for it as I grew up, and here I am.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Doing it,
And I guess too, I've got 3 kids who've grown up in theme parks, and it might be for them a little bit at times like you just described. It's like you have too much ice cream, and after a while you can't taste the ice cream.
Correct. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
But can you talk a little bit about growing up in a family that goes back that far? Do you know your family heritage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you take us back to the beginning? Do you know where that whole thing took root?
So on my mother's side, Christine, she's a Perry, and so that's Perry's a circus family, and I think them and Ashtons, and now Perry's and Ashtons were cousins, so there was a split there, but they are the oldest continuous travelling circus in the world still. So that's pretty rich heritage. Now my mother's grandfather, or great-grandfather, I always get confused, he came out and he was in Van Diemen's Land, and he was a performer. So like the convicts back then, they weren't convicts, were they? Because everyone had to have a role, even though you were locked up. If you were a butcher back home, well, you were the local butcher, and he was a bit of a performer. So he had a pub, he was a publican, and he would play music and sing songs. And
we're talking about colonial Australia.
Yeah,
wow.
That far back. And so
incredible.
he did that for 7 years, I think, and he ended up going to the mainland and doing vaudeville with his wife. And they went around Australia, travelled a bit of a circuit, and just made money doing vaudeville shows, tumbling and acrobats. And he would apparently played a fiddle and stuff like that. So and his son continued that legacy, and he was a horseman, and then was in the circus. That's and they were involved with the Perry Circus. So it goes back a long way on my mum's side. On my biological father's side, he joined the show and worked for a company called Durkin Amusements, and just regular staff, wanted an adventure whilst waiting to go to uni, and ended up falling in love too much with the adventure side of things, and then ultimately took over the company. So sort of two extreme, sort of very different paths to get to the same point in a way. My mum and dad are no longer, they separated when I was about 4, very close to my dad, but I've got my stepfather, he's in the industry as well, Emil, in the show industry.
Right.
So, so whilst I had an interest in my history and I respected it, I didn't really want to do it myself. I felt like I wanted to do something completely different. growing up. And it was in 2006 when I travelled the world, something clicked, and I went overseas, and my ambition was to find a language that I wanted to learn, and a career that I wanted to do. And then, in the end, I didn't find a language, and I came back to doing what I didn't think I wanted to do.
Why did you find that you were ready to do it? How did that happen?
I was on a beach in Barcelona, and I'll take one step back. I was in London earlier, and I was working in a pub, like young Australians do, and I met a guy who had some bungee trampolines, and they're really basic sort of, you've probably seen them, strap the kids in, they bounce you. And he had 2 of them under the London Eye, and he told me his story, and these sort of, not really sexy, there was nothing cool about them, but yet they were so hypnotic to kids, and that interested me. And he told me the money he made from doing it, and I thought, not that it's about money, but it just blew my mind. I thought, wow, like you don't necessarily need to have the actual London Eye. You could have the little thing at the bottom and still really be successful. And it sort of stuck in my head, and then about a month later I was on a beach in Barcelona, and I'm having a beer, and I saw a set of bungee trampolines. And there was this bloke, and he had Speedos on, nothing else. And he had a big fat belly and a big hairy chest. And his staff were all these beautiful women in bikinis operating these bungee trampolines on the beach. And I thought, well, there's a different way to do it, and I like that way, And
because you're a Speedos guy.
Yeah,
that's
I'm a Speedo guy. Yeah, that's why. and what happened was I thought that these things are so cool, and I hadn't really seen them in Australia. So I sort of did a bit of investigation, and they weren't much. They weren't expensive. And I thought, until I know what I want to do, maybe I'll do this. I'll be the bungee king in Australia.
That's great.
And so I did. And then what happened was, everything that's good about the industry and the things that you spoke about in your keynote speech today, all those things about seeing, having an impact, and watching a kid do a flip, when he was too frightened at the start of the ride, and then he does it, and then the engagement of the crowd cheering, clapping, and all these things that we love in our industry, it became part of me again, and I was like, I see, I get it, and since then I've done nothing but that, and I've grown my business.
That's fantastic. How did your parents feel when you finally came around to this idea of, you know what, I'm in?
Well, yeah, they were okay. They were pretty supportive. They would have been happy if I did anything, and they knew I didn't want to work for them, so I did it on my own. Mind you, you think you're doing it on your own, but you're not.
You
they're
never are.
And they're supporting, whether it be a little bit of financial, whether behind the scenes they're making phone calls to allow you to get on an event or whatever it may be. But
what do people not know about that world? Because I guess for thousands and thousands of people, they'll hit those annual shows in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane or around the country and take for granted it's all here. We have our experience with it, we go home. But what do people not know about that travelling nomadic kind of life, and the setup and the behind the scenes and the endurance that has to be at play? What do people not appreciate about a story like that?
Well, I don't think at this day and age they appreciate, probably now the professionalism that exists in the industry, especially at that end, that top end of the capital shows, Sydney and Melbourne, and they have a bit of a outdated view of us as an industry, and it's probably pretty negative. So that they don't realise the sacrifice that above anything else, you are still a small business operator. You're no different to I said before, a butcher or a mechanic with his small workshop. You're still that person. It's just that, you're taking your butcher shop to country towns, to capital shows, and you've got to sort of, under all conditions, and they can be trying, whether it's weather related or financial related or whatever is happening, you've got to set up and operate and deliver something to the public like it's a theme park. It's got to look like it's never not been there.
I'm glad you said that. Just to jump in quick, I was in Mount Isa maybe 3 weeks ago. First time in Mount Isa for a speaking engagement. That night I took a walk out from the apartment that I was in, and the last thing I expected to see, I saw. And it was the spire of a tent, and it had illuminated lighting design on the brand, and it was the Moscow Circus.
Yeah.
And I took a photo because it was in the middle of this barren, straight horizon that went on forever, and one of the major mines was still doing what it was doing over in the corner, and spewing forth what it's spewing forth, and it was active. And I just thought the sun was going down. I thought, the Moscow Circus is here.
Yeah.
What kind of setup and endurance marathon got them out to Mount Isa and set up like that?
Yeah.
So deep into the western regions.
And the other thing people don't appreciate is, some of these shows that you go to has millions of dollars worth of equipment. Like the outlay and the thing there for this tiny town like Mount Isa or I'm going to Rockhampton in a couple of weeks, and you're taking the logistical effort to drive 3,000 kilometres, or when we go to Perth, 4,500, 5,000 kilometres.
Right.
Trucks on the road, and then it's up, and then they sometimes wander through the gate and they're like, oh, it's a bit expensive, and the person that keeps complaining, and you're like, are you right? We've just driven 4,500 kilometres to get here to give you this, Sort of makes you laugh, when because you've got your insurances, overheads, rents, all this stuff, and logistics of being on the road.
Can't even imagine it.
And it's, you charge them $6 and they're like, $6?
I don't know if it's the same thing, but when I hear you talk like that, I remember when people were losing their minds in that transition of, if you're coming out of doing your grocery shopping, you're going to pay 15 cents or 30 cents for your plastic bag.
Right.
And I still remember being in shopping centres and hearing people losing their minds, staff. I've got to pay what? Oh, you're 15 cents for your recyclable bag. Now, eventually that settles down, but I imagine there's still pockets of people that are outraged about such things.
Yeah, and we never wear them out, you see, because we move. We got the privilege of finding the outrage in every single country town. We can find the Karens and the complainers in every town. We bring them out. And my favourite thing is sometimes the mums and dads, they come, how much for the roll? $8. $8? And they'll be mid-complaining whilst putting their hand in their pocket, giving you the money, telling you how you're robbing them. And you think to yourself, you don't have to go on the road. And I always say, it doesn't matter what the price point of the ride is. The moment that mum or dad is lost in that moment, in their story, using your words, watching their kids figure out how to do a flip, or coming off the ghost train and almost in tears for fear, and they're laughing themselves silly, they've forgotten the price.
Yes, of course.
And it's irrelevant.
Yes.
Because there's no price point on that.
My eldest son's very first thrill ride was at the Brisbane Ekka. And I think it was something like $9 or $12 for this ride, whatever it was. And I remember thinking, I looked at it and thought, I'm not getting on that because it looked too intense. And I said, no, you're going to do that one on your own, buddy. Because I'm more of a show guy than I'm a rides guy, just by nature.
Yeah.
But he went on this, it was his first thrill ride. And we paid, didn't think about it. Away he went. And when he came back, the elation, and then he wanted to recount the story. It was almost like a coming of age moment for him.
Yeah.
Look what I just did.
Yeah.
And that's the power, I think, for kids too. When they have that experience, it's like a rite of passage.
Yeah, that's right. And I own a ghost train. That's one of the things. I own a big ghost train called the Spook. And I like it when you see it, like little kids the year before, too scared to go, and this year they're brave enough.
Can I just say, in that space real quick, my brother and I were those kids at the Newcastle show for years. We lived in a town called Raymond Terrace, which was just outside of Newcastle. And we'd go to the show each year. And the ghost train was always, oh, wouldn't it be great, but no. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great, but no. Mm-hmm. And I can still remember, it's a visceral memory of getting on and doing that ride, feeling old enough to do it. And the biggest scare was some guy almost in a sheet as we've come past, grabbing me on the left shoulder and letting out a and me wetting myself. And that memory's still rich because that ghost train was aspirational.
Yes, that's right. And there's a bit of that too. And I say to the staff I say you don't need to win an Academy Award. Scaring someone, because the ghost trains are mostly like a boo scare, my one. Scaring someone's like telling a good joke. It's all timing. Right when you think they come down the hill, they go around the corner and they think, right when they think, this is lame, then that's when you get it. Then, this is a WOODALL, you bastard, you go, and you only need one scare, and they got their money's worth. And so I like that, and I like watching mum or dad go on with the kids. And it happens so often. The kids come out and they're brave enough to go on, and they're in tears, they're crying through fear, and mum are wetting themselves laughing. And I'm like, that's great parenting. That is great parenting. Yes. I love it. So,
When you look ahead from where you are now, like you say, you've got a Rockhampton trip coming up. I know COVID's obviously been a real big kick, but as the industry starts to reheat, what does a year look like for you? What's that year? If it's running at full capacity in terms of your resources and your bookings?
Well, we go away. So let's say we do Sydney show, we do Moomba in Melbourne, which is a big one.
Yes.
Straight into Sydney, and then I try to have we have a month off, and the crew have annual leave and things, and then we head up north, Rocky, Mackay, Townsville, Cairns, then back to Brisbane, and then up to Adelaide, and then we split Melbourne-Perth. So it's a logistical nightmare at times, but I've made a promise to myself, and this is due to COVID, when I guess we've all had, we've reassessed the way we live our life, that I'm cherry picking a little bit more, and the way I'm setting up, I'd like to not have to go away up north as much, and maybe do the big events and use the creative side, which we all have, and mine's, I want to get it out and do my own events. Like you were talking about, whether it's a micro event or it's a Halloween event or that, and we have rides that can do it, so why not use them? And so that's for our future. That's where we want to aim. A little bit less travel, and a bit more reliance on ourselves, as opposed to, because we do rely on a lot of external forces, a lot of other people's events in a sense, like the shows. And you have no control,
Right, that's interesting.
If they decide the event's off, you're off. If they decide to put the price up on the gate, you got no control.
Can I just ask you? You don't have to go into great detail. I don't even know if you were affected. I've got former colleagues of mine and friends that are a part of the Brisbane Ekka, for example. And I think it was maybe first year when COVID hit, and it was Ekka's on.
Last year, that was me. I was there. Yeah.
And then at the witching hour, no, it's off.
I was finished.
That's the question I wanted to ask you. I never heard what that did to people, but in my brain I'm like, how do people recover when you're set up and then suddenly there's nothing?
Well, for me personally, I set up and we're coming out. I think everyone was suffering a little bit of mental health. Imagine being nomadic in your nature, artistic in a way. You're a showman. What you love about the theme parks, the colour, the vibrancy, the customers, the smiles, all that, and all of it being ripped out of your world and having the uncertainty attached to it. And then all of a sudden it opens up and we could do the Ekka. And so there was this relief and excitement. I've never been more prepared for a show. I'll set up 4 days and I thought, shit, what am I going to do now? Clean. Like, we're that ready to go. And then for them just to say no. And the frustrating thing, of course, was it was for 4 cases in the whole state. And it was an outdoor event, and it was just like,
wow.
And it was the frustration of it. And then money was low. We're 2 years in now, and there's set up for something. I'll give you a rough number. It's about 60,000 to set up, and then all of a sudden, you got that same amount to pack up.
Oh, come on!
And you've earned nothing, and so it was a test. And then a lot of people were homeless because I'm from Victoria. I had to make a decision. I can't go home because as soon as I go to New South Wales, I would be considered dirty because New South Wales at the time was having a bad outbreak. So every other state, had their rules. So I had to go across Australia and then down because and then we sort of tread water in South Australia because we thought we were doing Adelaide show, and then Adelaide show cancelled as well. And so at that point I had 2 decisions. One was to risk it all and go to Perth and really risk it, or just hold what you had left and then hope that you can survive until it opens up again. I chose to risk it all and go to Perth, and I did my sums. When I got to Perth, I worked out that I didn't have enough money to get home if Perth cancelled.
Wow.
So, that was, and I'm like forever indebted to Perth show for happening, forever indebted to my staff, because
they believed.
I had to sell the story, and sometimes didn't believe mine's bullshit. And I had to constantly go, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. This event. Oh, it's going to be great, And I didn't believe what I was saying. But if they had to really want to do it, and they had to believe. And a lot of my crew from overseas, just the way it happens. My main girl Maria, she's from Argentina, and it was like, what am I doing here? So. But we did, and it was a successful show. It was a really good show.
I just say what you were doing there is a great demonstration of leadership and not management. It's a great demonstration of leadership to be able to unify people, even when you've got doubt in your heart, that they need to believe in something.
Yeah.
You need to believe in something, and that unifies the group. And yes, it's a spin of the wheel, but it obviously paid off for you.
Yeah, it did. It really did, and it got us then through to where we are now. We've worked all summer. We've done Sydney, and now it's everything lies ahead. And I really believe the Ekka this year is going to be enormous. Adelaide will be enormous. Perth and Melbourne. And
we should say too, I know I have got friends and colleagues, as I mentioned, that are part of Ekka. We went through our challenges at Village Roadshow theme park as well. And part of what we had to make clear to people was, hey, this is state government regulatory bodies. We're not making these calls independent.
Yeah.
We're under direction.
Yeah.
And I think that also added tension, because at the coalface you're dealing with the customer who maybe doesn't want to hear about your trials. They just want to understand how and why they're getting told no.
Yeah.
And I mean, fortunately we are starting to come through that. But I imagine the crush of all of that. You talked about financially the impact, and I appreciate you being that open, but some people I imagine couldn't come back.
Yeah.
And maybe aiming to try and do that. But did you see and know people that, no names necessarily, but did some businesses simply find this is where the train stops for us?
Yes, there was, and there was a lot of businesses decided to not take the risk I took, and I appreciate that too. But yeah, of course there was. And
I think that's a part of the tragedy of that whole thing is, and that's the reason for this podcast too, right, is to capture stories from people like yourself and find out that it goes back generations. And if we don't capture those Australian stories, they're lost.
Yeah. And what's it been for?
Yeah. And that's again the motivation is to sit with people like yourself and unpack some of these things and just have the broader community, even internationally, appreciate that there's this whole other economy.
And you know what? It just reminded me of something I thought the whole way through the pandemic, and that was how undervalued the media, especially, and government to a sense, how undervalued we are as an industry, whether that's music or theme parks. And
arts and entertainment usually takes the first hit.
And we took the biggest hit. Yep. And I heard a quote in there, it sees us as bread and circuses. And you need both. But what's the point of eating? What's the point of surviving and just that? And not smiling, not laughing, not feeling emotion and not, there is no point. Like there really isn't. And we play a really enormous part in that. And I saw it when the first Sydney show happened. I swear to God, people were lining up in lines for the sake of lining up in lines. They just wanted to feel close. I'd never seen happier people to line up for an hour in my life. They just wanted to be in a crowd again.
That's fascinating.
And it was like, there must be a psychological study into it that like we need each other and for good or bad, and our environment, what we do, we provide that, and we provide the colour sometimes to life. We provide that sort of, an escapism or whatever it is, and I just think it sort of got disregarded too easily.
Yeah, and I don't think it was just this industry that felt that. I know the live music industry.
Big
I've got
time,
friends that are
yeah.
in bands, and that just dried up without a second thought. It wasn't in the conversation about being compensated because it's not seen as perhaps a real thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's entertainment. And yet art and entertainment is the fuel. It's the delicacy for living. It's the thing that enriches life. But because it can't be quantified and distilled down, because you're talking emotion and feeling, I think that's where it suffers. That it's hard for big business and big government to quantify value. And it's like, you'll often hear people say, you guys are carnies. I mean, I've had that line thrown at people. I'm thinking, you would find carnies offended by you calling me a carny. Because I'm not even...
He's not a carny.
Yeah.
I'm a carny. And don't call me a carny.
Yeah, that's right. But certainly don't call him one. Yeah. He doesn't deserve it.
If you're going to throw these terms around...
But it's funny how people will very quickly dismiss all those rich stories, as you say.
Yeah, and they're the tapestry of life.
That's the word. That's the phrase I was looking for.
Yeah,
well said.
Yeah, and that's why, I don't know if the listeners will know, but you base your keynote speech around the stories, the storytelling and things. And you go back tribes, like all they had was stories. That cultures passed down through storytelling, and we're a big part of that. And so I appreciated it, but I could see during the pandemic we barely get a mention of musicians, theme parks, So it was a really hard period in time. Hopefully we're through it now. For me, it's changed the way we're going to do our operations a little bit, but at the same time, not. We're still going to appreciate what we did and hang on to it.
How do you find the industry, particularly for people that are multi-generation? And I spoke with a gentleman today that's 40 years in the business. He's going into his 70s. Are people that have had that kind of history, are they finding that they're able to be adaptive and evolve?
Yeah, yes and no. In our industry in particular, people are pretty agile anyway. They have to be. You're on the side of the road in Timbuktu and you've got a breakdown, you've got 24 hours to get to that, you've got to figure it out. So you've got to evolve and adapt and things. They do struggle with but this is a generational thing, it's probably not unique to our industry. They all struggle with technology, and technology playing a bigger and bigger part in our lives. And in a way, it's like an intrusion. So I know my parents, they don't want to know about it. Everything's digitized. Oh no, someone's listening.
Yeah.
But apart from that, no, because they are so good. It's one of the strengths of our industry is our ability to adapt and evolve, and we will continue to do so, I think.
When you look ahead at the years to come on your journey, what do you see? What do you think the evolution of your business is going to be, say 5-10 years?
Personally or the industry?
I think personally.
Well, I just want to continue to do what I'm doing. I want to consolidate. I don't know if I want to grow much more, but I want to continue to enjoy it, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons, and feel like I'm making a bit of a difference. And the challenge of that, I'm taking over my dad's Ferris wheel, it's a permanent structure in Adelaide. It's like 54 years old, so I want to hang on to that, and for me, that could be a legacy that I could then pass down to my kids. I want to keep coming to these things, meeting people, learning. I want to keep travelling, and I wish and hope and pray that I can get my creative side and the artistic and the performing stuff that I want to do, and sort of bring that into what I do, and sort of use it to my advantage in a business sense, and create a point of difference. So, short term, I've got a bit of an ambition of what I want to do, and I can't give away too much. But that's what I want to do. I like the idea of, I love theme parks, and I love what we do, and I just want to combine those two things more. I like the idea of the customer, even if it's for 5 minutes, losing themselves, or staying in the body and becoming part of a story or a narrative whilst going on your ride. So it's not just going on a ride, going around, hopping off the ride, going on another ride.
You got it.
Yeah.
Well articulated, mate. It's a pleasure to sit with you. and in a short amount of time, I think we got a lot more insight and understanding of the world that you come from. And I think anyone listening will be better for it.
Oh, thank you.
Myself included.
Right,
Thanks so much for joining me here on Park Life, Trent. It's been a real honour.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure. It was really fun. Thanks.
Good on you. Cheers.